This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow Cook Eat Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and today I'm actually on my own because I want to bend your ear about something that I feel us as gardeners maybe don't take quite seriously enough. So I'm going to bang my drum on behalf of biennials. Now, biennials are funny plants that often people just think, oh, you've got to grow them from seed or buy seedlings, so someone else does it for you. And yet you've got to plant them in the summer or the autumn to flower the following year. And, you know, is there room in my garden for something that behaves like that? You know, do I want a perennial that I just put in and it comes up year after year, or I want an annual that just flowers pretty instantly? Well, I kind of get that. And really, honestly, I only started taking biennials seriously when I was growing cut flowers, sort of semi-commercially, in that I really wanted to be able to produce flowers from Perch Hill that we could use for weddings that I was doing at that point, and supplying a hand-tied bunch business in London. And what I found was we could have tons and tons of things in, you know, tulips in spring, etc. And that was all very well, but they were quite expensive. Well, they are expensive, aren't they, tulips, to put in the bulbs. So I wanted to grow something that was a filler that would flower at the same time as the spring bulbs, but that I could grow from seed or from seedlings. And of course, that's biennials, and particularly the early flowering ones. And there are really three that are guaranteed to flower: March, April, and May. And they are very useful for that. And those are wallflowers, the whole Erysimum group, and the Honesties, the whole Lunaria group, which comes in purple and white. And then, in fact, I now supplement them with forget-me-nots. And forget-me-nots, the Myosotis group, are great, but they are prolific self-seeders. So, in fact, you really want to clean cut forget-me-nots if you have a very pristine garden, because otherwise they will start seeding through. And if they do seed, then you want to edit your seedlings massively so they don't become a takeover merchant. And the final one that would do early like that with your bulbs would be Iceland poppies. And I absolutely love them, Papaver nordicalis. So that's how I discovered them. And then I also found it really frustrating because we then started opening the garden at Perch Hill, 25 years ago or so. But I couldn't take bookings for people wanting to visit the garden in May. And that's because once the tulips were over, say by the 5th to the 10th of May, to be honest, the next sort of flush of flowers came from sweet peas and hardy annuals. And really honestly, that doesn't start to be a showstopper until, 10th of June sort of thing. And so we had this gap that coincided with the Chelsea Flower Show. And in the early days, a lot of our groups came from the States or from Holland or from Germany, and they were coming to England to visit the Chelsea Flower Show, and then they'd want to tag in to come and visit gardens in the south and southeast of England, where, of course, we are. And I was having to say, no, I'm really sorry, but the garden just isn't good enough at that moment. And then we discovered successional flowering roses, the roses that flower really reliably from early in May, like the wonderful variety Mutabilis, Rosa Mutabilis, and Bengal Crimson. And in fact, really quite a lot of the new hybrids flower early. But more than anything, we also realised, of course, it's biennials. So what's flowering in your woods in May into June? Foxgloves. What's flowering on your stream sides if you're out in Yorkshire but sweet rocket, Hesperis matronalis, in May into June. And so, of course, they are brilliant May gap fillers for colour. And they are across the board. So whether it be Sweet Williams, wallflowers are still going, forget-me-nots are still going, particularly if you've picked them or deadheaded them. Foxgloves are fantastic at their peak then, Sweet Rocket as its peak then, Cow Parsley at its peak then, also a biennial. So they are unbelievably good May gap fillers. And then it's their tolerance. So think about, again, where you see Foxgloves in the wild or Sweet Rocket in the wild. It's in moist soil and it's in shade. It's at the bottom of hedges in that dappled shady patch that is often the most floweriest in nature. You've got primroses, but you've got foxgloves also in a wood. When a tree falls down in a wood and light gets down to the wood floor, and you'll see this so often if a big oak comes down or something, we've just had one down here, and then the light will get in, it'll spark germination of the foxgloves, the biennials, and the following year in May and June will be a carpet absolutely packed full of foxgloves. But they have thrived in dapple shade, and that's the thing about them. And so they're really, really wonderful for quite tricky corners. And whether it be the white variety, Digitalis purpurea alba, that's not its proper name, but it doesn't matter. Or, you might want the wild pink one. Or I love this very, very soft smoky pink one called Sutton's Apricot. I think that's absolutely stunning. So again, they're really, really versatile in terms of where you can grow them. And then lots of them have scent. So if you want to pick flowers, they have good vase lives if you sear the stem ends in boiling water, but also they have perfume. So of course you know that with wallflowers, that lovely old-fashioned room-filling fragrance. If you put them in a sunny window, you walk in and it'll just hit you. And I never forget going for the first time to this garden at Sissinghurst in spring. And I walked into the cottage garden, and before I turned the corner and saw the south face of the south cottage, I knew that they were wallflowers en masse, and indeed they were. Erysimum Fire King and Erysimum Blood Red, planted on the south face of the south cottage, and somehow the yew hedges were holding the fragrance almost like a sort of candle, a scented candle, and were holding it in there. And it was just the most ecstatic, unbelievable, swoony fragrance. And of course, stocks, well, they're biennial. So Mathiola incarna, which I see a lot in spring, literally sort of right on the edge of a beach or on a cliff, you'll see the purple wild form of Mathiola incarna. And that smell, wow. I mean, it's moth-pollinated and it really, really draws the pollinators in, the moths in, by its fragrance. So perfume is just incredible with a lot of these. Sweet Williams, of course, as well. And then texture. So what could be more velvety than some of those stocks or some of those wallflowers? So you've got texture as well. And if you're somebody who loves rich colours and textures, the velvet wallflowers of things like Vulcan, again, blood red, Fire King, just couldn't be better. And also with fragrance, what else comes with that is they are good for pollinators. So I've already mentioned the moths, but you won't see a bed of wallflowers without bees harvesting the nectar and the pollen. They're brilliant for early, hungry bumblebee queens wanting to forage in the forget-me-nots, in the wallflowers, etc. And they're so useful for early. And I love them for that. And maybe almost as much as all those things, what we find, as well as plugging the May gap with us at Perch Hill, is they give us sweeps of flowers for the cost of a packet of seed. And even if you have to buy seedlings because you can't grow things from seed because you just don't have the space, they give you such brilliant value for money because you can have a sweep of 30 to 50 foxgloves or Hesperis right the way across the garden, either in the purple form, Hesperis matronalis in its natural form, or the Hesperis matronalis white. And that I look at into the farmhouse garden out of my bedroom window at night, and the whole place just glows in the most beautiful way. I mean, famously, that's why Vita made the White Garden at Sissinghurst, because her dining room was what's called the priest's house, and she would walk through what is now the White Garden to go to bed over in the South Cottage. And that's why she chose white flowers, because they're unbelievably beautiful in May and June at dusk. And so she'd be walking off, having had her dinner, through the absolute glow of white foxgloves and white Hesperis, and having sweeps of flowers for a packet of seed priced is just the most wonderful thing. So lots and lots of reasons. And as one comes to the end of the year, don't forget also the most sustainable way of having flowers in your house is actually having seed heads that are really good for harvesting. And I am so happy to see that Honesty Lunaria annua has become one of the trendiest things. You go to the chicest London florists and they are using Honesty like there's no tomorrow. And so it's those coin-like seed heads that you take either side of the seed pod off and you're left with that mother of pearl, sheeny, wonderful with fairy lights and Christmas lights through it. And people are now making great strings of them along with straw flowers to make Christmas decorations. So they've become the chicest of chic, and they are so easy to grow. And the other final thing is actually a triennial, which is Smyrnium perfoliatum. And the combination of Smyrnium perfoliatum, which is triennial, and Honesty, which is biennial, for your winter flower arrangements are absolute stonking winners. So you've got to grow biennials. And of course, May, June is the time to sow them. July, August is the time to plant them as seedlings. But they are just unbelievably good value garden plants. And more of us should definitely grow them. Thanks so much for listening to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, talking about biennials. I hope that was interesting. I love them. They're some of the very best garden fillers for really good little amounts of money and are very easy to sow from seed. Next week, I'm talking to Gary Newell, who lots of you will have heard before, who's part of our horticultural buying team. And he is a real expert on something called matrix planting, which will explain all. But it's basically how nature arranges itself into shrubs and trees, climbers, below them perennials, below them bulbs, and ground cover plants. So we're going to talk about all that Gary knows about matrix planting. So I hope you'll listen then. You can find more information, photos, and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.